All right. Hello, everybody. We will go ahead and get started. I want to welcome you all. We'll have more people kind of joining us throughout. So welcome as people are able to sign on. I want to welcome you to our first event in a series of virtual roundtables presentations surrounding our current exhibition on display, which you see here behind me. It's called 40 Chances, Finding Hope in a Hungry World. I am out in the exhibit, so I have a mask on because I'm out and about in the museum, but I have a microphone, so hopefully you all can hear me okay. This exhibition that we're going to talk about over the series of the next 4 weeks displays the photography of Howard G. Buffett. It includes 40 photographs that document the world hunger crisis as a part of a global awareness campaign that Buffett did. It is on display through January 30th, so we're in the final weeks of the exhibit. And to create the book by the same name and then the exhibit that followed, Buffett actually traveled to 137 different countries as a part of the project. The exhibit is divided into 7 sections. And so over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to take 2 sections at a time. And then the final 7th section, the last panel on January 27th, will have the theme of hope, which is the final section in the exhibit. So our hope with this series and in designing this and choosing our panelists is to bring the global issue highlighted in the exhibit to a more community and local level. So to do this, we've engaged lots of experts from local organizations in our community and surrounding communities. And today we're going to focus on the sections in the exhibit called Hunger and Water. To get started, I am going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and they're also going to share a little bit about their organization and the work that they're doing. Then we will proceed with some photos in the exhibit, and our panelists will offer some reflections on those. So to get started, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Hornacek with a company called Together, and I'll let him introduce himself from there. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Abby. I am going to try to share my screen. We'll see if it... Abby, can you give me a thumbs up or something when it comes up? Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon, I think officially, according to my clock. My name is Mike Hornacek. I'm the president and CEO for an organization called Together, as Abby mentioned, and you could see on your screen. I have been at Together, let's see, 2022 will be 13 years, which is really hard to believe, actually. It's went by really fast. I won't talk a ton about me. I'd like to talk more about Together, but probably the one unique piece about my journey and experience at Together is I spent 18 years in the retail sector before I took a giant leap of faith into the nonprofit sector. And so that's kind of my unique fact, and actually always catches everybody off guard because begs the question, how did you go from that to human services nonprofit sector, which I could talk about that later if we have time. But anyways, Together is an organization that you may or may not have heard of. We've been in the community for 47 years this year. Our unique tie to the community is the 1975 tornado. We were formed by the 1975 tornado and were created to meet the needs of those tornado victims and make sure that we provided food, shelter, and basic necessities. What we look like today is an organization that's focused on hunger and homelessness. As you can see, we really envision someday in our wildest dreams, a community that experiences safe, affordable housing, food security, health, and wellness. A couple things about Together. I'm going to try to really focus on just our food insecurity programming today because of the topic of the conversation. So I will stay away from some of the homeless services and homeless information that are on my slides. But the big one that I think, if you look at the exhibit that Howard has put together and you really tie it to our community, the statistic that I think is really important is 1 in 4 children and 1 in 6 adults in the state of Nebraska are food insecure. And that's a pretty large number when you look at the population in the state of Nebraska. I always kind of joke about it, but I mean it seriously. We are called together for a reason. And so collaboration is as important to us as our programs are. We don't believe in really operating in a silo. We believe in working with a lot of community partners to address the issues that our community has. The ones on the screen in front of you are just a couple of the partners that we work with on a regular basis. Our Nourish program is really the centerpiece of everything we do around food insecurity. A lot of you probably know us for our Choice Pantry. In the last 24 months, good, bad, and different, you've probably seen us on the news quite a bit for the cars lined up Leavenworth all the way to the highway because of the extreme need we've seen because of the pandemic. In addition to the pantry, we have a pretty sizable community garden footprint that really helps us focus on nutrition and making sure that the food that we're handing out is focused on produce, dairy, and protein, and we're not just distributing items that are canned goods, for example. We put quite a bit of effort into nutrition education. So classes, food demonstrations, in the lobby actually while we're doing food distribution. And we do a lot of SNAP and WIC outreach to make sure that we are focused not on just the immediate basic needs that individuals and families face walking through our door, but looking a little bit deeper than that and starting to address some of the root causes that are behind why people are walking through our door every day. Root causes are vast and too many to number. So we definitely do not address all of them, but we start to look at that anyways. And then, as I mentioned, through collaborations, we have a pretty large support network of services. Just a couple pictures to kind of bring to life what I'm talking about. This is what our pantry looks like. It's supposed to operate like a grocery store, so the days of kind of box of food don't really exist anymore. People come in, shop through just like they're at a grocery store. We really focus on dignity, compassion, and a good welcoming environment. Sometimes people ask about, well, like, how much food are you talking about? This is a 24-foot straight truck. We get a delivery from this truck filled every single day. That is how much food we distribute at our buildings every day. This is just a quick picture of some of the community gardens that were expanded during the pandemic. This is a couple of those pictures of those cars lined up down Leavenworth all the way to the highway. A couple more pictures of us filling cars during the pandemic because we didn't operate inside for those first 12 months. To honor everybody's time, I'm going to skip a little bit. If anybody has questions or wants to get a hold of us during the presentation or afterwards, there's my contact information. I'm happy to visit with anybody, answer any questions. With that, I will wrap it up, Abby, so I don't take too much time.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we're going to circle back around to all the panelists again after the intros. So you'll definitely hear more from Mike and everybody else in a second here. But in the meantime, I will go next to Nancy Williams. She is with an organization called No More Empty Pots. and I will let her introduce herself and her organization.
Hi, thanks for having me. Thanks for being here. I serve as the co-founder and the CEO for No More Empty Pots. I'm not sure if you all can see the chat, so I'm gonna paste the link to our website there where you can find a whole bunch more information. I'll give you quick highlights. No More Empty Pots got started in 2010. And the intention was to map what's happening in the local food system, connect all of the people and the things that were going on, and then to help pull together collaborative efforts to fill those gaps. And in those 10 years, because that's where we are now, in 2022 now, we've been able to pull together a coalition of individuals, organizations, for-profit and nonprofit businesses, government entities, to support a myriad of programs and activities that include food production, distribution, consumption, recycling, and let's see, we have production, distribution, recycling, processing, and all in one place called the Food Hub. And if you're on the website, then you can see images of the Food Hub. And when we circle back around, I can throw up some images so you can see that as well. But the Food Hub has been fully operational since 2019. It's been closed to the public for the most part since March of 2020. But within this space, we have several licensed commercial kitchens where we support food entrepreneurs that can rent the kitchens by the hour to start and grow food businesses. We have an 8-week culinary training program for folks who are unemployed and underemployed. We serve youth to seniors in nutrition education. And we have a cafe where we serve local foods from entrepreneurs and local seasonal food secured from local farmers. And during the pandemic in 2020 through, and we're still doing on a lower scale now, providing scratch-made meals and boxes of produce from local farmers to individuals and organizations in the community, where we do delivery directly to the door if transportation is an issue, and people can come by the hub and pick up as well. There are a lot of educational programs that we do with organizations like Boys and Girls Club, North Star, Girls Inc. We have a great collaboration with Together Inc., where in 2020, when there was so much chaos and turmoil and trying to serve people in need, that there are a lot of folks who could not get to the pantry. And we were already delivering food to them. And each week, Together staff would deliver a pallet of prepackaged pantry items that we could deliver to patrons on the truck with the food that we were taking to them as well. So it was one stop, one delivery, and helped to ensure that people got what they needed when they needed it. And that is what we intend to do with No More Empty Pots, is meet people where they are, help them reach their goals, and then help all of us in the community move to a higher level of self-sufficiency and sustainability.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Finally, we have Frances Hayes. She's with the Dougherty Water for Food Institute. I believe you're in Lincoln, Frances, is that right? But it's just as cold there as it is here, it sounds like. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my PowerPoint here, and I'll be super quick, but I could talk about the Institute for a long time, but I'll keep it short. So yeah, we're the Dougherty Water for Food Global Institute, and we are connected to the University of Nebraska, but we were started with the Dougherty Water for Food, the Robert B. Dougherty Foundation about 10 years ago, but we very much enjoy our connection to the University of Nebraska because it gives us a lot of resources that we can tap into. So we have maybe more of a global and a local focus of working to ensure a water and food secure world. As we all know, our population is growing and everything's kind of interconnected. And so we're going to be needing to produce more food in the future, and we want to make sure that we protect our water resources when we do that. So this is a really great panel for me to be on because I think it relates a lot to what we do. So we do this mostly through scientific and policy research and engaging with farmers and policymakers and investors, both private and public. So a little bit less on the ground work than Mike and Nancy have discussed. But our hope is that we share knowledge and catalyze change through that research and those recommendations that we make. So we work a lot with state and global partners to expand our reach. We have what we call faculty fellows through the University of Nebraska. And those are just researchers that do research related to our mission, kind of so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can use the resources that we have around us. We also do a lot of support for student research because we think that's really important, especially in getting new ideas on how to solve these big problems. I won't go through all of these, but these are kind of our main 5 pillars. We recently added a public health component in which we work with the University of Nebraska Medical Center because hunger and food and water align a lot with public health and mental health, and it's all kind of interrelated. So also a lot of drought, flood, climate change type stuff, and what we call agricultural productivity gaps. So making sure that we're making our water be most productive and produce the most food, but also, as Mike mentioned, making sure that it's nutritious food as well. So here's some of the work that we do in Nebraska and regionally. We work closely with policymakers and growers here locally, addressing rising nitrate levels in Nebraska within our water, and how do we continue to grow food and raise cattle and those type of things, but also maintain our water quality, because we're really lucky here in Nebraska that we sit on an aquifer, but we want to make sure that we keep it usable and full and those type of things. So a lot of modeling and forecasting and risk analysis and things that are a little bit in the nitty gritty, but our goal is to help farmers make good decisions, be profitable and have a good livelihood. And then also working with the National Drought Mitigation Center, we do a lot of work with to work through those kind of issues of too much water or too little water, depending on what that might be. So I will keep it short, but I'm excited to be here, and thanks to Abby and the Durham Museum for including us.
Great, thank you all for those introductions. So the bulk of our time here, we have 2 sections, like I said, that we're going to try to cover and kind of ask our panelists to reflect on, again, kind of bringing it to that level of what they do, which in some cases is a more local level. So I'm going to turn my camera around here and show you the first section here on hunger and tell you a little bit about it. And then what I'll try to do is show each of the photos that were chosen. Mike, you're our first one. You chose one kind of high up, so I'll do my best to get a good view on it. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit just about the section as we get started. So I want to share with you how the exhibit describes the section on hunger. It states that hunger rarely makes headlines, but hunger and malnutrition are the biggest threats to health and education in the world. More people die every year from the effects of hunger than malaria, AIDS, and tuberculosis combined. And then it goes on to describe how photos in this exhibit range from a young girl in one of the poorest countries in the world to the picture you see kind of in the middle on the bottom, which is a military veteran from the United States, which is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So what I'm going to do is start with Mike, and I'm going to try to zoom in here and show you the photo that Mike chose is this one up here. Of course, there's a light shining right on it. There we go. So this photo up here, which was taken in 2004. And Mike, I'll let you take it away and talk a little bit about why you chose this photo.
Thanks, Abby. Just really quickly, the photo is a really young girl, or at least looks really young, that looks very malnourished, very thin, looks very sad, kind of has a look of desperation on her face. And really the reason that it spoke to me was it's obviously a really shocking photo. It's sad to look at. And I think when we talk about hunger outside the United States, that might be a picture that we're used to seeing. But I think the reason it spoke to me is, we don't necessarily see pictures like that associated with hunger in the United States. But yet we still see the same extreme issues. And I think the pandemic highlighted that in Omaha and Nebraska and in the United States around hunger. It's just a little bit more disguised, so it's not as visible. So when I looked at the picture, it really jumped off the page for me for that reason. It's very hard to look at. It's very sad to look at. Somebody that's a young girl. I have kids of my own, so that really speaks to me when someone is that malnourished and really has a look of desperation and a look of really fear and help on their face. And obviously we all just want to reach out and help and do everything we can. And then secondarily, like I said, it really spoke to me just because I think it's easy to feel a call to action when we see that picture. But we don't necessarily think of that when we think of hunger in the United States. But I think the issue is just as severe. We just don't see it look the same way, if that makes sense. So that's why I chose that picture. And I think we'll have an opportunity to expand on that a little bit more later, so I could talk a little bit more about, in my perspective, what hunger looks like in Omaha in our next section.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. So Francis, you actually chose the photo right below that. So I'll kind of zoom in on that one. This one was taken in 2008 in Mozambique. And I'll let you share a little bit about the photo you chose and why.
Sure. I wanted to read the caption on this one too, because I think it's important. It says, 2 boys wait for food rations, their lifeline to survival after severe floods destroyed the family's crops in Mozambique, one of the poorest countries in the world. And so I think, as Mike mentioned, sometimes it can be difficult to bring these issues of hunger to a local perspective because, we're in the US, we're in Nebraska. It seems as if we should have plenty of food, but I think we've seen more now than ever that food supply and agriculture are intricately connected, and then you kind of add disbursement of that in there and difficulty during the pandemic and those type of things. And I think it's easy to think that, this picture is somewhere else and it doesn't happen here and we can just ignore it. But I think the part that stuck out to me also with this is the flooding. And that all parts of the world are susceptible to extreme weather events that can really have a devastating effect on not only crops, but also livelihoods, and then mental health and all those other things that follow with that. So I think what this brings to mind for me is the bomb cyclone that happened in Nebraska in spring of 2019. And if you're local to Nebraska, I'm sure you remember this, but essentially what happened was in February and early March, it was exceptionally cold, and then the weather turned and the snow melted really fast. And then we had a heavy rain, and it just kind of caused everything to flood and caused almost $1 billion in cattle and crop losses. So, and then we had issues with wastewater and our wellheads and all those type of things. And I think it just shows that it can affect everyone, and it can kind of reveal the fragility of some of the systems that we have in place. And so I think it's really important to think proactively, because I think that these types of things will obviously continue to happen. And organizations like Together Omaha and No More Empty Pots it's really important that we have these resources now, because I think with the pandemic and seeing those resources pivot, having to create those resources from the ground up would be really hard. And so they do that from having those organizations in place. And we do that by working with organizations like the Drought Mitigation Center and kind of coming up with these mitigation plans of, how do we be more resilient so that during these times we can deal with that. And I think, plenty of people are working to reduce the amount of these severe weather events, but we have to figure out a way to adapt to them so that we can quickly and efficiently provide short-term aid, but also come up with these resiliency plans, whether it be here in Nebraska or around the globe.
Great, thank you. And then finally, in the hunger section here, I will ask Nancy to share some thoughts. And for this one, I'm going to zoom out a little bit for kind of some general reflections. But if Nancy, if you do want me to show anything in particular, certainly let me know.
Thank you, Abby. And thank you for sharing these. For me, it's the collection. It's caused a lot of reflection. I have seen this exhibit, images from this exhibit before, and I actually have the book, 40 Chances, with the images in it, and I have the book with the narratives around the 40 Chances and how that term, why that term is used, why Mr. Buffett is using that title. But what I wanted to bring attention to is the collective. If you see in the lower middle, there's an image with the flag, and there's a gentleman there that is saluting. I believe his name is Emmett. And from the images that you've seen before, it is from a reflection of people that represent the global majority. And there were references to how things are different in this country, yet we still have hunger. But a lot of times the circumstances that create the conditions for hunger are different in this country versus other countries. And especially here with this gentleman, and what we see in the United States more often is that hunger is a condition of not having resources in the right place at the right time versus having severe drought or flooding at the extent that it's been happening in other countries. And what Francis just mentioned about the bomb cyclone, we are going to experience more of those types of events. We are experiencing more of those types of events as we are working through climate resilience actions and protocols to help deliver a more stable environment for all of us to live. But the issue of hunger and food insecurity is still ever present here in this country as we are looking to bring together, access to more local food because of the issues with supply chain that we have experienced in the past 2 years in response to the pandemic. But when you start to look at that, Francis mentioned the impact of the floods. There are roads that were impassable. So even though there was food available, it could not get to the places where it needed to go without extra mileage because roads were closed or the extra cost of transportation. And there's also this need to build up local systems so that when we have these types of events that are local and regional, that there is less disruption and that people can continue to get the food, but we're building that capacity locally instead of having to source from farther out outside of our community. So there is a local impact and a global impact to the way that we are sourcing and distributing food. And there are going to be even more issues that we're going to run into. But what I see from this collection of images is the opportunity to do things differently and to bring in the element of hope as that inspiration to change what we're doing so that we all have what we need where we need it. I'm not sure if I lost everybody. I only see.
No, it wasn't you. Sorry, I was
Okay.
having a hard time finding my unmute button. Thank you so much, Nancy. So we are moving over to the water section. And I know there's going to be a lot of connections here, which is why we put these two topics together. And so after we get some reflections on a couple of photos in this section, we will one more time come around to each panelist and also kind of talk more about the connection between these two topics. But first, let's just start by talking about the photos in the section on water. Again, I want to share with you the exhibit description of this section, which shares that more than 1 billion people around the world lack access to safe drinking water. Waterborne diseases such as cholera, typhoid, and dysentery kill more people every year than war and terrorism combined. Population growth, conflict, drought, and pollution are contributing to a global water crisis. These photos portray the daily struggle that millions endure for something that many of us take for granted. So once again, we'll start with Mike. And Mike, I believe you chose this photo over on the right. So let me kind of zoom in on that. And I will turn it over to you to share a little bit about this photo, which was taken in 2007, it looks like.
Awesome. Thank you. Just briefly, the reason I picked this photo was 3 or 4 things that popped into my mind. One, as Abby kind of alluded to already, is just the distance people have to go to access water. As I was looking at the picture, obviously the probably teenager, I'm guessing, maybe a little older than that, is carrying this pan or pot of water on their head and is going to have to walk probably several miles to get to their village where they will actually be able to use this water. And it's probably 2 to maybe 3 gallons of water. And it's coming from a source that is obviously questionable as far as its sanitary value. And so really it makes me reflect and think about how easy it is for us to access water in the United States, even though we've articulated and talked about some of the challenges that we still have accessing water, but by comparison, it is very easy for us to access water. I didn't plan on this, but my coffee cup's got water in it, and it took me all of about 45 seconds to walk over to the faucet and put water in it. And that's, for the most of us, that's our reality in the United States, but that's not the reality that the picture is illustrating for us. I think, as we do tie it back to the United States, the one thing that the picture also spoke to me about is access in general, though. I know this is really about water, but When you look at hunger and water and you tie it together and how important water is to us growing food, to us having healthy diets, things like that. Access to food and water, once you get outside of larger city limits, sometimes can be challenging. I think of, I grew up in Michigan, in a really small town that had about 800 people in it, and I don't think the population has changed in 46 years. It was a 45-minute drive to a grocery store. It was a 45-minute to an hour drive to a hospital. And so while, yes, the conditions in the picture and the conditions of what I'm talking about are very different, there are still some alignment that even in the United States, access is not easy for everybody and is different depending on where you live.
Thank you, Mike. And then Francis, you chose, if I can get away from the glare on this one, you chose the photo right next to this here, which was taken in Mali in 2003. Do you want to chat a little bit about your photo?
Yeah, I'm going to read the caption again. It says, an elderly woman waters her crops in Mali. No mechanical irrigation system exists, so it requires manual labor to produce crops, said Buffett. When I took this photograph, I was reminded that in these living conditions, there is no retirement age. So when we were asked to speak on a photo that spoke to us, this one stood out to me because so much of our work at the Institute relates to irrigation, especially here in Nebraska, and prescribing how much water you use when you irrigate and things like that is really important, I think, to the state, and getting that, I guess we call it more crop per drop type mentality. And I think until I began working for the Institute, I didn't know that a Nebraska farmer was the first person to invent center pivot irrigation. I hadn't considered why all agricultural land wasn't covered in these perfect little crop circles, or maybe I just hadn't noticed. But when you take a look at this photo of an elderly woman who is hand watering her crops, you kind of think about, I guess, how lucky we are to have these ways to irrigate. I can't imagine how we would water all the fields in Nebraska without them. And I think one of the joys of working with the Institute is that we get to take the expertise and knowledge from one of the world's major farmland regions and share that around the globe. But we also get to take these lessons of others and bring those ideas home with us. So I think when you're faced with issues like this of how am I going to water my crops, you kind of come up with some new and innovative ideas. And I think there's a lot of diversity in how farmers deal with water challenges around the globe, but everybody kind of deals with it in a different way. And there's bits and pieces that we can pull from. And that's not to say that there's one solution for every area of the globe or even every type of cropland in Nebraska. But I think that's one thing I enjoy about the Institute is being able to kind of share some of the knowledge of the innovative farmers that we do have in Nebraska and the things that we've learned, and trying to maybe scale that to other regions. So.
Thank you, Francis. And last but not least, we will hear a little bit from Nancy on this section.
Thank you, Abby. And to reference Mike and Francis's comments, I grew up in a small town in Louisiana, and we grew most of the food that we ate. And most of the watering that we did was by hand. We didn't have irrigation because we were really trying to conserve the water. So we put it directly with the seed and directly with the plants. And listening and knowing that there are many communities right now that are close to us, a lot of tribal lands where they are dealing with water quality issues in Nebraska and throughout the country, and as well as our neighbors in Flint who are still dealing with water crisis and having good quality water to drink. I don't take this for granted. And the other thing is, with the things that are happening with climate and water accessibility, it is even more important that we are considerate of our water usage and our sources and how we conserve and recycle the water. One of the programs that I'm familiar with that the Buffett Foundation has supported is with cover crops, and cover crops help to conserve moisture. There's a practice of no-till that also helps to conserve moisture and reduce competition so that plants have, crops have a better opportunity to thrive and grow with fewer inputs and resources so that we all have the food that we need to eat. But one of the biggest issues for the global community is access to clean water consistently and conveniently. Mike referenced, how easy it was for him to get good clean water. But when I think about a lot of the challenges that women and girls in our global community struggle with, being able to have access to school and learning opportunities, because their primary role is to ensure that there is water available for the people in their household and themselves. So when we ensure that there is clean, accessible water, we do more than make sure that people can live and thrive. We also create the opportunities for more women and girls to access opportunities so that their livelihoods are improved and all of the people that they support and that are around them in that household and that community are also improved. And there's story after story that shows the impact of having clean, accessible water and the ripple effect of the positive impact for the women and girls and everyone in that household, in that community.
Thank you, Nancy. All right, so I'll turn my camera back around here. I think the last thing we'd like to do before we kind of close is circle back to everyone. We kind of by design kept these two topics fairly separated, although it's a little bit impossible to completely separate the two topics. But let's talk now about how the two topics do connect. So how the lack of one can affect another, and vice versa. So we can kind of go in the same order if you want, or anybody feel free to kind of chime in with that.
Well, I'll just briefly kind of talk about a couple of reflections as I was listening to Francis and Nancy share their thoughts. When you talk about hunger and water and how they're intertwined in access, one of the things that I kept coming back to and how it connects to the pandemic and what we've experienced locally is really hunger and water's role in our community's public health, and how important locally grown food is important to the health of our community. And I know there's a lot of things that go into those comments, but I know some of the things we experienced as an organization trying to respond to the food insecurity needs of our community during the pandemic really tied in a lot to access to food, our ability to get it, to be able to distribute it, and having to work through our normal sources that had to procure food from national outlets. And as Nancy articulated really well, when roads were closed or people were having staffing shortages because people were extremely fearful of working during the pandemic, it was really, really difficult for us to source food when we needed it the most. And I think Francis and Nancy did a fabulous job of articulating too. You know, I think a lot of us were caught off guard by the pandemic. We hadn't seen one in 100 years. But I don't think it's, you know, this is not going to be the end of emergencies that we're going to have. So the more that we can learn from this, adjust, and be more prepared for the next pandemic or endemic or the next flood or whatever we're going to see, we can learn a lot from that. But also, you know, in my mind, it really ties to the community's public health too. There's been so much conversation in maybe the last 5 years, but I think the pandemic really highlighted it around how food and housing as two key foundational social determinants of health really contribute to a positive community health. And when you talk specifically about the food piece of that, having access to water, access to food, growing locally grown food, all of those things will come together and tie to us having a more healthy overall community, no matter where you live, no matter your socioeconomic status. But we really have to take a close look at making sure that we have access to clean water. And we have the ability to grow and source food locally, not just nationally.
Well, I can just chime in next. I think we obviously think that water and food go hand in hand since it's in the name of our institute. But when you think about it, I don't think you can solve food insecurity if you don't also have safe and accessible water. So even when enough food is available, if your water's polluted or you have poor toilet facilities, those kids likely will still be experience malnutrition because of the way our bodies work, and you kind of can't have one without the other. And so on a global perspective, also as the picture that Mike talked about with water, the time that it takes to access drinking water, if you're having to carry pots full of water from a certain location back to where you live, that can be time that can be given to growing nutritious food or growing food that households can sell to increase their livelihoods, to pay for education, all those types of things. And so I think it's very interconnected. I don't think we can have lack of safe water and be food secure. So, and then I think to bring it back to the local perspective, we can have all the food that we need, but if we don't protect our water resources, it doesn't matter much. We're still going to have poor health, poor public health, as Mike mentioned. So I don't think that we can separate the two. And I think that this exhibit does a good job of kind of showing that and how we need to do both. There's no other way.
Thank you, Mike and Francis. And I will go ahead and jump in. I agree with all of this. Water is one of the basic things that organisms, humans and plants need to live. And we can do things to need less of it. So there are newer vertical growing systems and aquaponics and different types of food production systems that use a lot less water than we use in traditional crops, but it's still required. So having access to clean water is critical. It is one of the things that can cause even more conflict, or can help make this the places where we call home more productive and safe for all of us. Having access to good, nutritious food that's readily accessible is also important, because it's hard for us to live and thrive without that. And we need both. As as was mentioned. The two go together because this is part of an ecosystem of living that we are part of. And it's not only these two things. There are two components in a much larger and complex system, but they're very critical components to us being able to live and thrive and create places where each of us can contribute and can also live our best lives on our own terms. So the more that we are considerate of the resources that we have available, how we use them, and how we make them more readily available for all of us locally and globally, the better that our systems will perform and the more likely we are to ensure the longevity, because we are living a lot longer now than we did as a species years ago. And there's also a lot more change in diversity. The more that we are supportive, that we recognize what's happening and that we are supportive of these comprehensive, collaborative, positive changes, the better that it's going to be for all of us.
Well said, Nancy. Thank you. So we are right on time, which is fantastic. That's amazing. We actually have just a couple minutes. I'd like to ask each panelist to kind of share just any closing thoughts. If people watching, and we are recording this and we'll post it so more can watch. If anyone wants to learn more about your organization, I have no doubt people are feeling inspired and wanting to know what they can do to help or get involved. So if we could just go back around one more time and ask you to share a little bit about how people can get involved if they're interested, and then we'll wrap it up.
Find my mute button. There we go. First of all, just thank you, Abby, for the invitation and the opportunity to participate. It was great to be able to speak about the work that we're all doing and listen to Francis and Nancy and the amazing work they're doing and how kind of all of our organizations are really working together in a larger ecosystem to continue to address these issues. I think pretty clear we have a lot of work to do. We have a long road ahead. But so that's why it's so great to have these conversations, because we can't do it alone. We need a big band of advocates, if you will, to help us out. In terms of Together specifically, we have a lot of opportunities for people to get involved, from volunteering in our pantry to helping us with our advocacy opportunities, serving on some of our committees, our boards. The best way to access that information is just through our website at togetheromaha.org. Or I had shared my email address earlier. Either of those are great ways to get a hold of us, and I'm happy to answer any questions or touch base with people later. So thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for sharing.
Francis, go ahead.
Yeah, I just also wanted to thank you for having me. And I think art is a really great way to bring these issues to light too, and get people thinking about these things. So that's kind of a great way to do it. A lot of our work is very research related, and so it's lots of journal articles and things, and having a visual is really helpful. So I'm going to drop in the chat a link to our website. We just came out with our annual report, which includes kind of some stories of some of the major projects we're working on. As I mentioned, they're kind of nitty gritty, and but they're very important in figuring out how we're going to solve these problems of both global and local hunger, while also having safe water as well. So we don't really have volunteer opportunities for people to help. We always accept donations and things like that. We support a lot of undergrad and graduate students that are studying various aspects related to food and water security. So, but I think it's just important for us that we have people know about us and the work that we're doing. And we are always looking for connections to farmers and things too that are willing to test equipment or just getting their feedback, because we really have to lean on them since we're not the ones in the field and we need their input. So I think that's really important to us too. So if there's anyone that would like to collaborate with us, feel free to reach out. I'll also put my email in the chat as others have done as well. But thanks for being here today.
Thank you. And Nancy?
What I'm going to do is quickly share the website, and hopefully you can see this is where you click engage and connect, and you can click contact us and send an email, sign up for the newsletter, find local food resources if you need that for you, your neighbors, or someone that you care about. You can click on this and find volunteer opportunities and sign up to volunteer. You can find out events and classes here. There's also video, articles, lessons, instructions here in the resources link. We don't do the blog as much anymore, but you can find newsletters there. And as you can see from this, we serve a range of people from youth to seniors. And this is an example of different things you can do is help out entrepreneurs. You could work with younger kids and adults with education classes. You could help serve food in the cafe, and you could help make meals in the kitchen. So there are several ways to get involved. We appreciate all of the support, and we absolutely appreciate the opportunity to join the Durham Museum and Francis and Mike in this opportunity to talk about our 40 chances that we are given to bring hope and support to our neighbors and community. And thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you all so much for joining us. The exhibit is here till January 30th, but way before that, I hope you'll consider checking out the other 3 events that we have. The next one next week on the 13th is covering the 2 sections of the exhibit on guns and fear. On the 20th, we'll cover women and poverty sections. And on the 27th, we'll bring back some folks from the previous panels to help us wrap up with the theme of hope. So thank you all again for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.